If a senator were to ask you today about proposals about changing the current size of the Supreme Court, what would your response be?
In my view, judges should not be speaking to political issues, and certainly not a nominee for a position on the Supreme Court. So I agree with Justice Barrett.
Do you agree that the Supreme Court has been bought by dark money groups?
Senator, I don't have any reason to believe that that's the case.
What faith are you, by the way?
Senator, I am Protestant.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Non-denominational.
Okay. On a scale of 1 to 10, how faithful would you say you are in terms of religion?
I am reluctant to talk about my faith in this way just because I want to be mindful of the need for the public to have confidence in my ability to separate out my personal views.
But the only reason I mention this, Judge, you're reluctant to talk about it because it's uncomfortable. Just imagine what would happen if people on late night television called you an effing nut, speaking in tongues because you've practiced the Catholic faith in a way they couldn't relate to or found uncomfortable.
Judge Jackson, we've heard criticism from some about your previous work representing detainees at Guantanamo Bay. I want to give you an opportunity to address this issue because it applies not just to Gitmo detainees, but to your work as a public defender.
After 9/11, there were also lawyers who recognized that our nation's values were under attack, that we couldn't let the terrorists win by changing who we were fundamentally. And what that meant was that the people who were being accused by our government of having engaged in actions related to this under our constitutional scheme were entitled to representation.
If we close Gitmo and move them to Colorado, do you support indefinite detention under the law of war for these detainees?
I would just say I'm giving the facts. And
The answer is no.
I want to make sure that it's clear. The 31% you referred to goes back to the year 2009? 2000.
What does it matter when it goes back to? We had them and they got loose and they started killing people.
Well, I could just say that
if you're one of the people killed in 2005, does it matter to you when we release them?
suggest that a president of your own party released him in.
I'm suggesting the
Creating that
system has
danger.
failed miserably, and advocates to change this system, like she was advocating, would destroy our ability to protect this country. We're at war. We're not fighting a crime. This is not some passage of time event. As long as they're dangerous, I hope they all die in jail if they're going to go back and kill Americans. It won't bother me one bit if 39 of them die in prison. That's a better outcome than letting them go. And if it costs $500 million to keep them in jail, keep them in jail because they're going to go back to the fight. Look at the friggin' Afghan government. It's made up of former detainees at Gitmo. This whole thing by the left about this war ain't working.
Why in the world would you call Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld and George W. Bush war criminals in a legal filing?
Well, Senator, I don't remember that particular reference, and I was representing my clients and making arguments. I'd have to take a look at what you meant. I did not intend to disparage the president or the Secretary of Defense.
There was no time where you called President Bush or Secretary Rumsfeld a, quote, war criminal, close quote. Did you want to respond?
Correct, Senator. No,
Okay.
thank you. That was correct.
Is critical race theory taught in schools? Is it taught kindergarten through 12th?
Senator, I don't know. I don't think so. I believe it's an academic theory that's at the law school level.
Okay. As you may recall, during the confirmation hearings of Justice Amy Coney Barrett, there was a great deal of attention paid to the fact that Justice Barrett served as a board member on the Board of Trustees of a religious private school, and the press focused very intensely on the views of that school. In your questionnaire to this committee, you disclosed that you are similarly on a board, specifically the Board of Trustees for the Georgetown Day School. and that you've been a board member since 2019, and you're currently still a board member. Is that correct?
That is correct.
When you just testified a minute ago that you didn't know if critical race theory was taught in K through 12, I will confess I find that statement a little hard to reconcile with the public record, because if you look at the Georgetown Day School's curriculum, it is filled and overflowing with critical race theory.
I do not believe that any child should be made to feel as though they are racist, or though they are not valued, or though they are less than, that they are victims, that they are oppressors. I don't believe in any of that. But what I will say is that when you asked me whether or not this was taught in schools, critical race theory, my understanding is that critical race theory as an academic theory is taught in law schools, and to the extent that you were asking the question, I understood you to be addressing public schools. Georgetown Day School, just like the religious school that Justice Barrett was on the board of, is a private school.
Have you ever used, employed, relied upon critical race theory to determine the outcome of any case, or to impose any sentence, or as a framework for your decision-making?
No, Senator.
Guidelines called for 10 years. Prosecutor wanted at least 2. You gave him 3 months. We're talking about 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds and 11-year-olds and 12-year-olds. But you say this does not signal a heinous or egregious child pornography offense. Help me understand that. What word would you use if it's not heinous or egregious? How would you describe it?
It is heinous. It is egregious. What a judge has to do is determine how to sentence defendants proportionately consistent with the elements that the statutes include, with the requirements that Congress has set forward. Sentencing is a discretionary act of a judge, but it's not a numbers game.
Congress doesn't have clean hands in this conversation. We haven't touched this now for 15, 16, or 17 years. And you aren't the only one who faced this kind of a challenge with the cases before you.
We can have a policy debate about whether or not the guidelines are too lenient. I would argue in this era of exploding child pornography, they're not too lenient at all. I think you were right the first time when you voted in 2003 to make them tougher.
I will just say that I don't know if you sponsored a bill to change this. I'll be looking for it. But I will tell you that there isn't a long line of people waiting to co-sponsor this controversial issue.
You chose to rewrite the law because you were sympathetic to a fentanyl drug kingpin whom you had expressed frustration at having sentenced him to his 20-year sentence in the first place. You twisted the law and you rewrote it so you could cut the sentence of a drug kingpin. That's what you did, Judge.
Respectfully, Senator, I disagree. Congress provided judges through the compassionate release motion mechanism with the opportunity to review sentences.
So you said in your opening remarks that you haven't been as good of a parent, I think if I'm paraphrasing right, as good as a mom as you'd like to be. Could you maybe explain for me what you meant?
I said in my opening that girls, you've had to deal with me juggling motherhood and job responsibilities, and I didn't always get the balance right. And so I would hope for them, seeing me, hopefully you all will confirm me, seeing me moved to the Supreme Court, that they can know that you don't have to be perfect in your career trajectory and you can still end up doing what you want to do, that you just have to understand that there are lots of responsibilities in the world and that you don't have to be a perfect mom, but if you do your best and you love your children, that things will turn out okay.
Can you provide a definition for the word woman?
Can I provide a definition? No,
Yeah,
I can't.
you can't?
Not in
Okay.
this context.
So you
I'm not a
believe the meaning
biologist.
of the word woman is so unclear and controversial that you can't give me a definition?
Senator, in my work as a judge, what I do is I address disputes. If there's a dispute about a definition, people make arguments, and I look at the
All right.
law and I decide.
So why would you want this job?
If you're a lawyer and if you believe in public service, which was a core family value for my family, then becoming a judge is certainly an option that one pursues. And then, of course, being on the Supreme Court is the capstone of a life in public service. And I would just be so honored to have the opportunity to use my time and talents in this way.